Hello, everyone. Welcome to Mind Matters, empowering conversations for public safety professionals, where we'll discuss topics involving wellness and first responders. Join me on this journey of learning from subject matter experts in their various fields of psychology, medicine, leadership, and many more. You can find our show on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Let's get into the show. I'm your host, Elizabeth Morris. Good afternoon. Welcome to Mind Matters. I am your host, Elizabeth Morris, with my co-host, Gary Fly. And today we are talking with Dr. Leah Kaylor. And we're going to be discussing navigating sleep challenges and trauma for first responders. So welcome. And I want to give just a little background about you. So hold on tight for that. Dr. Kaylor, she is a licensed clinical and prescribing psychologist with a specialty in forensics. She is a licensed clinical psychologist for the FBI, and she helps those who have experienced trauma while on the job, such as shootings, graphic crime scenes, and viewing job-related child sexual abuse images. She's aided in numerous psychological debriefings, some of the most impactful events in the FBI community's recent history. And right now, she just completed a book that will be published in October called The Sleep Advantage for First Responders. And then she'll have a second edition that's focus is more on our military professionals. So good afternoon and welcome again.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I'm excited to be here. One thing I want to mention right off the bat is that, yes, I do work for the FBI. However, everything I'm going to say here is my own thoughts, feelings, opinions, beliefs, and doesn't actually reflect that of the FBI.
Got it. Okay. Thank you for stating that. And so let's jump in. I have had the opportunity to meet you a couple of times and hear your presentation on sleep and specifically those challenges that our first responders face.
As we were preparing for this, Dr. Kaylor, you mentioned that this is your passion. And so I'm so intrigued by all of this. How did you get involved? And tell us just a little bit about why this is your passion.
Absolutely. So I wish that I could go back in time and remember if I actually wanted this or not. But when I was on my residency year at the Memphis VA Medical Center, we had various different rotations that we had to do in order to complete residency successfully. And one of the very first days, all of the interns, all of the postdocs, we all go into a room and we're not allowed out until everyone is pretty satisfied with all the rotations that they're going to get. And there are some compromises that we have to make. And I really wanted the forensic rotations, and that's what I got. And then there were a few open spots in my schedule, and I ended up with the sleep clinic. And I wish I could go back in time and remember if I actually wanted that or not. But nonetheless, I ended up having a rotation on the sleep clinic, and I just fell in love with it. I learned all about sleep hygiene, CPAP adherence, nightmares, insomnia, and not only learning about it, but teaching about it. I had a lot of people falling asleep on me while I was teaching my sleep hygiene classes, which is very normal. I'm totally used to it. No offense taken. We have so many people who are very chronically sleep deprived, but then also learning how to, I don't want to say fix, helping people get on a better path towards sleep, because especially the longer these sleep challenges have been going on, yes, it takes more work to fix these types of things, but not to say that there certainly aren't lots and lots of tools that we can use. I just found these skills to be so incredibly useful. And when I got to the FBI, one of my very first days, the supervisor that I had there had asked me, okay, so what's your thing going to be? And I said, well, what about sleep? I'm a mental health professional, I'm a psychologist. And I think that in society, there are stigma around mental health, but I would say, especially whenever we get into law enforcement, there's a significantly higher level of stigma and apprehension when it comes to seeking these services. So I figured, okay, what if I offer sleep? Because everybody can relate to having a crap night's sleep, whether you have chronic pain, whether you have a dog that needs to be let out several times throughout the night. Everyone can relate to having a crappy night's sleep. And then once people get a chance to get to know me, hear me talk about these sleep issues, get a chance to work one-on-one with me, then I think I'm opening the door towards people to be more open to seeking the other services that we have for mental health. So that's really how everything got started. And that was like 6 years ago now.
That's great.
Very good. Well, thank you for that and setting the table. I'm curious. So you've obviously now done a lot of work around first responders. What do you see? What sort of sleep disorders do you see in this population? What you found?
You name it, I've seen it. I feel like I think that there's so many issues. And if I could only talk to you guys for 5 minutes and give you one tip, this is the tip that I would give everyone, is consistency. And I know that that can be very challenging, but that is the top recommendation that I would give for people, is going to bed at the same time every night and waking up at the same time every day, because that's when your body starts to understand what it is that you want from it. It understands how it needs to perform, but also then it starts to get into a rhythm of it feels sleepy whenever bedtime should be rolling around. You'll hear of those mythical people who can wake up before an alarm. That is obviously a pipe dream for some people, but as you start to be consistent with your sleep, your body just knows what it's expected. And then we start to just see better sleep quality, better sleep efficiency. So not that you're just laying in bed all night, tossing and turning, but that you're actually in bed and your body knows what to be doing in bed. So I'd say that that's one of my top tips, but I see lots of insomnia. And I think that people don't realize, I think one of the things that happens whenever I give sleep lectures, because I do this probably about once a month, and I'm starting a YouTube channel, which is very exciting, so people can get even more tips there. But one of the things that I see is that people who are a captive audience at a conference that I'm already going to be speaking at think that, like, oh, whatever, like, I've heard everything that there is to hear about sleep, or my sleep has been so crappy for however many years, there's nothing that I can do to impact it. And the truth of the matter is that there's so many things that you can do to impact it. There's so many things that we do during the day that impact our sleep, so many things that we do as we're transitioning to sleep, so many things that we do in our bed or throughout the night that impact our ability to sleep. And I think that my mission, what I'm trying to do, is just open everyone's eyes to see, no, there's actually so much more that you can be doing so you can be getting a better night's rest. Because when you do that, that impacts literally every aspect of your life. It really, truly does. So I would say insomnia is a huge piece. And then also, to answer your question, I get tons and tons and tons of sleep referrals because I'm the FBI's expert on sleep. But when it comes down to it and I get a new referral and I start talking to someone, oftentimes what it is, I would say like 9 times out of 10 too, is that it's untreated mental health issues that are manifesting as a sleep disorder. Someone who is not taking care of their depression, their anxiety, some type of trauma that needs to be processed. Oftentimes that's also a piece of what I'm seeing as well. So I'll stop there and see what questions you have.
Well, I recall you talking about the consistency piece and how important that is. And, what do you say to our public safety professionals who are like, Dr. Kaylor, I work shifts, and it changes, I'm nights for 4 days and then I'm days. And what are some tips that you give those particularly that are like frontline and doing the shift work?
Whenever it comes to that, that is probably one of the most challenging. And I don't necessarily have some type of magic bullet for people. And I think that that's what's going to be important, is like just generally having good sleep hygiene. So where they can be consistent, great. Where there are times where they are awake when they should be sleeping and sleeping when they should be awake, just trying to stay with that consistency. But also too, I think there's a leadership piece in this as well, where when we have these, like, we get it, right? Crime doesn't stop when the sun goes down. Like, that would be very naive to think that. And so it happens all the time. And that's why we need people to be protecting us around the clock. But whenever it comes down to that, there can be some things that leadership can do. So there's something that we call chronotypes. And you've probably heard about this before. Some people are what we call an early bird, and some people might be called a night owl. And so if we're going to be doing shift work, maybe we could get a better idea of who is on our force and who are naturally those night owls, who that is what their body wants to do. And so perhaps maybe those people would be a really good fit for this night shift, because that's naturally what their body already wants to do. Also, one of the things that we know about shift work is that whenever there's rotating shifts or shifters changing all the time, it makes it that much more challenging. So if we do have to do shift work, something that leadership can do is make it more consistent. So those are a few suggestions that I have. But again, I wish that we didn't have to do shift work, but that's just simply not the reality of the world of law enforcement.
I agree with you. It's a leadership piece, and I'm hearing from a number of our agencies. Actually, one of our Sheriff Dance, she's our only female sheriff in North Carolina, recently put out a survey particularly she was focused in the jail, to her detention officers and asking that question, like,
Oh,
what would
that's
you
awesome to
prefer?
hear.
And, you know, in her mind, she's thinking, oh, everybody's going to want to work days. It actually, there was I don't remember the percentage, but there was a fairly high percentage that wanted to work nights. But I mean, it's like where we naturally are. Are we more of a morning person? Are we more of a night person? And I do think with your research and presentations to leadership, you know, throughout the country, they're going, so maybe we can do a few more days where they're on mornings and then have an in between time and then shift to evenings and help with that consistency factor.
I'm so glad that you mentioned that because I think that, again, in my book, I have an entire chapter on leadership, and we look to our leaders and we follow their lead. So are you talking about the value of sleep, or are you that person who's pushing through, that you're pounding energy drinks, that you're telling everyone to tough it through? We are going to follow your lead. And so if you are putting sleep as a high priority, if you are putting that as part of your conference or your health and wellness initiatives throughout the year, and you're teaching people how to get better sleep, that's going to trickle down. But it really does start at the top.
I agree.
So you mentioned the leaders pounding energy drinks and things like that. I'm curious, do you see common mistakes or challenges that maybe first responders make throughout the day or throughout the week that relates to sleep hygiene and how it might impact their ability to get good rest?
Absolutely. So whenever I do my lectures, it's pretty funny because normally there will be a lot of people in the audience who do have an energy drink right there that they like crack open and they're drinking during the lecture, which just kind of makes me laugh. And then as we're talking, they kind of get this like shameful look like, oh, don't look at me. Don't look at my energy drink. But here's the thing. I would love to see people prioritizing good sleep at night. It is what it is. I understand that you have so many different things vying for your time, and caffeine does have a place. I'm not saying that it doesn't, but the timing of caffeine is going to be really important. So the best bang for your buck, and this goes for everybody, is about 90 minutes after waking up, because whenever you wake up, naturally your stress hormones of cortisol and adrenaline peak. And that's to get you up out of bed, to get you moving. And then after about 90 minutes, they kind of start to taper off. So if you're having caffeine at that 90-minute mark after waking up, those hormones are starting to taper off, and then you have the caffeine to kind of get you up and get you moving. That's great. Now, as we move throughout the day, and one thing I want to mention is everybody's physiology is going to be different. So there will be some people who are ultra rapid metabolizers and some people who are very poor metabolizers. So just keep this in mind, as everybody has very unique individual differences. But when we get closer and closer to the afternoon, it's going to be important that we are cognizant of what we're putting into our body. So caffeine has a half-life of approximately 6 hours. So that means that the caffeine stays in the body for quite a long time. And I think people don't realize this.
No.
So yeah, a lot of people don't realize this. And I'll normally ask people, okay, so what does half-life mean? So let's say, for example, I'll just take what I have right here. We have this huge thermos of coffee. Okay, and I'm going to drink this at 2 p.m. Okay, so after 6 hours, so if I drank this whole thing, after 6 hours, we still have this much, so half rocking and rolling in the body. It's still exerting its effects. Then after 6 more hours, we still have this much working in the body. So the caffeine just doesn't come in and leave the body immediately. It is working for hours and hours after we consume it. So it's going to be really important that people who want to have better sleep hygiene, that they're cutting their caffeine off early into the evening so that it can make its way through the body. And by the time it's bedtime, they're ready to lay down, that caffeine has done what it needs to do and has made its way out of the body. Something else that I see is whenever we think about caffeine, we think about coffee. Yeah, we think about energy drinks, but there's some really sneaky sources of caffeine that we don't realize. And I think a very big piece of this for our first responders would be pre-workout. You know, I think that being physically fit, like your body is one of the tools as a first responder. And so you usually take very good pride in going to the gym and how your body looks, how it can function. And oftentimes people are taking pre-workout. Pre-workout is loaded with caffeine, like one scoop. Oh my goodness. People don't realize that. But also too, decaf doesn't mean caffeine free. So I think that there's a lot of things out there that people don't realize. Now there's, as I'm doing my research and putting this book together, I'm blown away that there are some enhanced waters, and I'm doing air quotes for those of you just listening audio wise, that the water has caffeine. So we're getting caffeine from a lot of different sources. And then also food will have mild amounts of caffeine in it too. Say, for example, you're going to have some coffee ice cream or you're going to have a bar of chocolate. So our caffeine, and this is something that I like to ask people to do when I do exercises with them, is that I'll give them kind of a handout and show them, okay, this is what the typical Starbucks drink has in caffeine. This is, Dunkin' Donuts. This is a 5-hour energy. So they can have like a worksheet to look off of. And then I'll ask them, okay, so let's just think about a typical day and let's start to add up how much caffeine you are taking in on a typical day. And oftentimes I think people are very surprised when we do this exercise at how much caffeine and how it creeps in very, very easily.
Well, and how long it lasts. That you taught me a number of things right there, but it's like, well,
Exactly.
maybe I should cut back on my Coke Zero. I just have one during the day, but again, based on my metabolism and, that could be the thing that's keeping me awake or waking me up in the middle of the night, I guess, too. Or is that that's probably more hormones and that at 3 o'clock time? What's happening at 3, Dr. Kaylor? Like
3 o'clock in the morning?
Why 3?
That's a great question. And if we're talking about you specifically, we're going to have to dig in deep and break it down. But yeah, I think whenever it comes to caffeine, it is going to be so important for people to be aware of it, because that's a lot of what I'm doing, my education. Like, I feel like my unofficial slogan is, you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
And so that's what I'm here to share with people is, okay, now maybe you know about half-life. I'm not asking you to cut out your caffeine. Like some people, that is their holy grail. Keep it. Just move it to the morning.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe like gradually cut a bit of it out. But that's what I'm really asking you to do, is just make modifications. I don't need you to do a major overhaul of your life.
Those are some great tips.
Yes, and going along with that, so you talked about a couple of daily routine adjustments, right? Earlier in the day, tapering it out. Are there other things, either for sleep or stress management, I guess it's all kind of combined, that you recommend to first responders?
There's so many things that we can be doing. And, let me just talk about some really simple, easy things. Because again, I feel like everybody right now is just stressed. There's so many things going on in their life. And they're like, yeah, of course I'd like better sleep, but I have like this much patience to do just about anything. So some really easy things that people can do: getting early morning sunlight, super easy. If possible, going outside is the best way to do it. No sunglasses. And this is whenever the sun is at like a low angle. So it's starting to rise up into the sky, and just going outside for a few minutes, looking towards the sun. Don't burn your retinas, but that is going to be excellent for your circadian rhythm. And our circadian rhythm is basically our body's internal timekeeper. It's really important that we do things to strengthen it. So that's an excellent thing that we can do. If you can't actually be outside, being near a window will also give you some benefits. But if you can just go outside for a few moments, that's going to be excellent. Same thing, whenever we think about our evening, if we have the luxury of being able to do so, watching the sunset is also going to be really great for strengthening our circadian rhythm. And I love bringing it back to this because I think it's so important, and people don't realize that our brain, even though we're in 2025 and we think, oh my gosh, we're so advanced, we've come so far. Yes. However, we still have the same neural circuitry as our caveman ancestors. So if we think about it, and our caveman ancestors, how did they know when it was time to be awake? The sun came up. And how did they know when it was time to go to bed? The sun went down. And so even though, yes, we have the ability to have all kinds of lights and screens, and we don't have to be tied to what's happening outside, we could think about a casino. Like being in a casino, oftentimes they have bright lights on all the time because they don't want you to know what time it is. So we have the ability to artificially do that. But if we're talking about getting good sleep, what we do want to be doing is, as it's getting closer to bedtime and the sun is setting, then we can dim the lights in our environment. And that's also going to help with our circadian rhythm too. So even if you don't have dimmer switches, turn off your overheads and just use some lamps. That's going to be something that will be really, really useful to start to give more signals to your brain and your body. Hey, it's time to slow down. It's time to start thinking about bed. Something else really easy that people can do: take a hot shower. Hopefully you're already doing this at the end of your shift when you're getting ready for bed. But whenever you take a hot shower, it paradoxically drops your internal body temperature. And when your internal body temperature drops, that's another one of the signals that your body naturally does to let your brain and body know it's time for bed. Because as you sleep, your body's temperature should drop at the beginning of the night, and then it should fluctuate throughout the night, and then the temperature should start to rise whenever it's time for you to wake up. So that's a really simple one. If you have the luxury of having access to a sauna or a hot tub, those are also going to be great options too. But if you just have a hot shower or a hot bath, that also gets the job done as well.
And speaking of temperature, do you have any thoughts of what the thermostat should be set on?
Oh, Elizabeth, you're opening a can of worms.
Argue about this every night. Gary, do you and your wife get?
No, it's set it whatever she wants it set at.
There you go.
Good man. Okay. So I don't do any couples work. However, when I give like a particular lecture and I do have couples in the room and I talk about this, I feel like I probably saved more marriages than the average marriage and family therapist just by talking about this, because I think there are so many people who have very clashing temperature preferences or sleep schedules. And, we could do an entire episode in and of itself on that. But what the research tells us is low 60s. That's what the research tells us that the room temperature should be at. Now, everyone is going to have personal preferences. My best friend, it could be summertime and she's rocking and rolling with a heated blanket. It is what it is. Yeah. So everyone's going to have personal preferences, but that is what the research tells us, is that it's low 60s is where the bedroom temperature should be. So I'll answer your question with that, because we could go down a whole rabbit hole.
We could. I've heard that. I've heard 65 is like the magic number, but yeah. So, well, specifically, especially with our first responders and all of the trauma that they face on a daily basis, many of them. How do you work one-on-one with those that may be struggling with like diagnosed PTSD or just that compounded trauma that they do have? How do you work with those folks with regards to sleep habits?
I think that whenever it comes to sleep and trauma, and this kind of just happened to be how my specialties shook out, they go hand in hand. So whenever people come to me for a sleep referral and then I start talking to them and then I realize, oh, okay, actually it's probably untreated anxiety, depression, or the trauma that you've been exposed to because of the mission, then what I'll often do is kind of just a very combination approach. Like I will do a lot of sleep hygiene. I'll give them homework as far as like creating a wind down routine, like having a transition between the busyness of the day and then bedtime. I'll give them all of my usual sleep tips and tricks. But then what I'll do is I'm certified in EMDR, which stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, as well as brain spotting. Those are my two favorite tools in my clinical toolkit. I find them, well, here's the thing. So before I came to the Bureau, I was trained in more traditional talk therapy trauma modalities. And I came to the Bureau and then I realized, you guys don't want to talk about your emotions. Okay, let me figure out another option. So very quickly, I decided to go down the route of EMDR, and then it took me to brain spotting. And I've never looked back. I think that those are two incredibly effective and very rapid techniques for processing trauma. If we could do an entire episode on that as well. But those are the techniques that I will often use, because when we process what we need to during the daytime, then the brain can kind of relax at night. It's not trying to process what it needs to at night. So let me just give you another example. I think people think that whenever they go to bed, you turn off the light switch. I think people think that their brain and their body are also on this light switch. So when you turn it off, like everything shuts down. Couldn't be further from the truth. So everyone's heard of REM sleep, rapid eye movement, but I think a lot of people don't realize what's actually happening. And so in REM sleep, the brain is incredibly active. It's processing things that have happened through the day. If we've got this lingering trauma that's been unprocessed, it's trying to work on that. It's doing lots of different things. So if we were to put a cap with electrodes on someone who is actively awake and they're problem solving, and then we put a cap with electrodes on someone who's in REM sleep, their brain waves look very, very similar. So the brain is very active. And whenever we have this unprocessed trauma or something that we need to be working through, and the brain is trying to do that, sometimes that's also where we end up with nightmares too, is that the brain is working so hard to process it, but then maybe our adrenaline and our cortisol are so high that it can't. And that's where we'll wake up or we'll have these nightmares, or we just have this like very fragmented sleep. So if I can help you in the daytime and process some of the stuff that needs to be processed, then hopefully you can move through the stages of sleep a lot more smoothly and a lot less fragmented.
That's great. So it's good to know that, based on, everybody's different, right?
Yeah.
So, meeting them where they are and focusing on the trauma first, as opposed to just jumping into, yeah, let's talk about doing breath work before you go to sleep, or it's really, getting to that first level. Gary, did you have any follow-up questions to that?
Yes. So you mentioned nightmares in that last answer. As I was preparing for this, I also was reading about a fear of sleep. Is that anything that you've
Yes.
been exposed to? And I'm curious what your thoughts are around that.
Absolutely. So I think of a particular gentleman that I worked with at the VA, but this is something that a lot of people experience is this fear of sleep or this dread of sleep. But I remember working with an individual who this fear was so intense that he would sleep like an hour a night. Like incredible sleep deprivation just because of the fear of nightmares. But also, this person had been deployed, they had gone to war. And so, just this fear of if I am asleep, I can't protect my family. And whether that feels true and realistic and rational and logical, that's not for us to decide. But that is why this individual was fearing sleep so much. And when they would sleep with a loaded gun because they were so afraid of having some type of intruder or home invasion situation. So I think that there's a lot of work that needs to be done around fear of sleep. And that's where cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, also known as CBTI, comes into play. And this was something that I often did at the VA, is the way that we think about things really matters. And that's why CBT in general is so incredibly popular. I feel like when you hear about therapy, you hear about CBT, but there's an entire form of CBT just for insomnia. And a huge piece of it is, how are we thinking about sleep? Are we having these thoughts about, oh, well, I just know that I'm already going to have a crap night's sleep. So what does it matter if I have caffeine at 9 p.m. anyways? Who cares? So it's really about identifying what are the thoughts that you're having about sleep? Are those thoughts realistic? Can we challenge them? Because not every single thought that we have is actually true and realistic. So it's a lot about working on our thoughts. And I think for people who have that fear of sleep, yes, I certainly see that. And we have to do a lot of cognitive challenging and reframing around that. And again, I think it goes hand in hand with trauma. I'm so glad that these are my two specialties because they're very hard to be untangled. They do go hand in hand for this population and for our military population too.
Well, tell us a little bit more about your book and your findings. And you gave the example of the gentleman that you worked with. Are you going through and giving us those scenarios and cases? Tell us more about what you've worked so hard for. How long has it taken you to write this?
You're going to laugh at this. It took me probably 2 months to write.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, you have a lot of data though.
So here's the thing, right? Like, I've been doing this for 6 years. I do these lectures all the time. I work with people one-on-one all the time. And I had gone to a wellness conference and I'd spoke about this and someone was like, hey, this was fantastic, but my best friend who really needs this information isn't here today. Do you have a website? Do you have this? Do you have a book? And I was like, you would be interested in a book? Okay.
The book, just give me 2 months.
Yeah. So I started thinking about it. The thing is like I said, sleep is my passion. I love it. I love talking about it. And so it really was just taking all the information from all the sleep lectures and just putting it down on paper. That's really what it was, because this book, while sleep is foundational and every human sleeps, this book is meant to be for first responders because that's the population that I work with and that's the population that's very near and dear to my heart. But also they have very unique sleep concerns. And so that's why I wanted to write a book specifically for them. So there's an entire chapter all about nightmares. But I think too, a piece of it is feeling understood, feeling like someone gets what you're going through. Every now and again, I'll go to a sleep lecture and I do try and make them as interactive as I possibly can. And so every now and again, I'm thinking about one in particular where someone raised their hand and they're like, hey, sometimes I have this dream where my gun doesn't go off. And, for a second, no one says anything. And then all these other people are like, yeah, so do I, man. And it's like, of course, but we're just not willing to talk about this. Like, you guys, this happens all the time. And like, you would be blown away at how many people have this same type of dream. So it's just one of the examples. I'm not necessarily using cases, but I am talking about like, hey, these are a lot of the themes that we would see in nightmares. Maybe it's a replay of something that you've gone through. Maybe it's a scenario where you are completely frozen and immobilized. Yeah, maybe it's a situation where your gun doesn't go off. So I try and let people know like, hey, I understand what's going on and here's some ways to help you. And that's really what the book is about. Is I give a really nice overview about sleep because I think it's important that you know why sleep is so important to begin with and why this should be something that you should be investing in. But then I like to think about it as like a troubleshooting manual. So if you're having nightmares, here's what I want you to do. If you're having a hard time falling asleep, here's what I want you to do. If you're awake in the middle of the night, here's what I want you to do. And that's really the way that I'm thinking about it. Is I want this to be a troubleshooting manual, and it's going to be a long one. It is probably about 250 pages, but I really want it to be this comprehensive book that you can have on your shelf, and anytime you're ever experiencing any problems with sleep, you can pull it out and there will be information in there to help you.
I think that's wonderful to have a practical guide, right? We're talking about our public safety and our law enforcement. It's like, just tactically, tell me what to do.
Exactly.
I'm looking forward to reading it when it does come out in October. And I know we're getting here right at time. Are there any final thoughts from either of you, or anything that you want to ensure that you share with our audience before we go?
So if you're excited about this and you want to read the book, one of the things that I am working on until then is YouTube. So I'm going to be at Dr. Leah Kaylor, and there was going to be tons and tons of free content on there for people to just get an understanding of why sleep is so important, a lot of troubleshooting things. Again, I'm right there with you, Elizabeth. I think that there's so much research out there, and like very high level research, but what I want people to have are tools on, here's a video I can watch, and here's one thing that I can do today to try and make my sleep better. So that's really what it's all about. So I would say if you're excited for the book and you don't want to wait until October 1st, come and find me on YouTube and write to me and tell me what it is that you want to learn about, because I'm actively making videos right now.
Yeah, and so tell us your email address, if you don't mind sharing that.
Absolutely. So you can write to me at info@drleahkaylor.com. And I also travel and do specialty workshops and things like that too. So if you'd like for me to come and speak to your squad or your department, I'd be happy to do that.
And where are we going to see you next? Where are you presenting next?
That's a good question. So right now I actually have like vacation on the brain. I'm like, oh yeah, which is very, very exciting for me. But where will you see me? That's a good question. I've got a couple of things kind of in the works for August and September. Things are really going to ramp up in the fall. So hopefully you will be seeing me on the speaking circuit in the fall.
I know. I hope to see you in North Carolina. I know I've seen you in Tennessee and maybe another state. But well, thank you so much for your time and for all the work that you're doing to help our first responders. So I hope you have a great afternoon.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thanks. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Mind Matters. Please give us your thoughts, and if you like this episode, feel free to share it with others. You can also find more content and choose to follow us on our Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn at the FMRT Group. Thanks, and we'll see you next time on Mind Matters.